Look at him. Dirty shoes, torn bag. You think someone like you will ever be anything in this life? You are a nobody, Williams. A nobody.
Ebo, please, I just need the job. I will work hard, I promise.
Hard work? Ha! Poor people always say that. Security! Remove this man from my office before he makes the place smell.
One day you will remember this moment.
One day what? Go and eat your one day. Get out!
You will see! You will regret this!
Get out now!
He walked out of that building with nothing in his pockets, shame in his chest, and fire in his eyes. She laughed. Her colleagues laughed. The security guard even laughed. But nobody was laughing 7 years later when Williams walked back through those same doors as the new owner of the entire company. If you want to know how a boy with torn shoes ended up owning the company that threw him out, stay right here. And before we begin, drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been mocked for where you started? Because this story is for you. There is a place in Lagos where the roads forget their roads. The gutters overflow when it rains, and the zinc rooftops sing loud and angry songs against every drop of water that falls from the sky. This is Ajegunle. This is where Williams was born, the third son of a woman who sold boiled groundnuts by the roadside and a father who drove a rickety downfall bus 6 days a week just to keep the family from sleeping hungry. Williams grew up understanding one truth before he understood anything else. Life did not give poor people gifts. Life only gave poor people chances, and you had to fight with everything inside you to hold on to those chances before they disappeared like smoke. He was not the most handsome boy in the neighborhood. He was not the tallest or the strongest, but every teacher who ever stood before him remembered his eyes. Those eyes never wandered. Those eyes were always watching, always absorbing, always thinking 3 steps ahead of whatever lesson was being taught. By the time Williams was 17, his father's downfall had broken down for the last time and could not be repaired. There was no money for a mechanic and no money for spare parts. His father sat in the compound for 3 weeks, staring at the useless bus like a man staring at a coffin. Williams watched his father shrink during those 3 weeks. He watched the light go out slowly behind his father's eyes, the way a candle dies when the wind is patient enough. That was the night Williams made his promise. He sat beside the broken downfall in the dark, put his hand on the rusty body of that old bus, and whispered to himself that he would find a way. He did not know how, he did not know when, but he promised the darkness and he promised his father's broken spirit that one day, nobody in his family would ever sit beside something broken and feel powerless again. That promise was the seed. And seeds, when watered by suffering, grow into things that cannot be stopped. Williams was 23 when he first walked into the glass building on Adiola Odeku in Victoria Island. He had taken a bus from Ajegunle, then a motorcycle because the bus stopped too far away, and he had walked the last 20 minutes under a sun that had no mercy that morning. His shirt had been ironed with care by his mother the night before. She had pressed every crease out of it with a hot iron and old newspaper underneath because they had no ironing board. His shoes were clean, but they were old, the kind of old that soap and water could not hide because the leather itself had surrendered and begun to crack at the edges like dry harmattan lips. He carried a green folder with his CV inside, printed at a business center in Ajegunle for 200 naira. He had rehearsed what he would say 17 times on the bus. He was ready. He believed in himself that morning with the full force of everything he had survived. The receptionist looked at him the way people look at something that does not belong. She did not smile. She pointed to a row of plastic chairs and told him to wait without using any word that suggested he was a human being worth addressing properly. William sat down and he waited. He watched men in fine suits walk in and walk out. He watched women in heels click across the marble floor like the building belonged to them and to people like them. Then Ebube walked out. She was the human resources manager. She was wearing a red dress that cost more than Williams earned in 2 months from his petty trading at the bus park. She looked at the list in her hand, looked up, and her eyes landed on Williams the way eyes land on something unexpected and unwelcome. She called his name like it tasted strange in her mouth, and she led him into her office not with welcome, but with tolerance. What happened in that office in the next 4 minutes would burn itself into Williams forever, not because it broke him, but because it became the fuel that never finished burning inside his chest for the next 7 years.
Williams walked out of that building and stood on the hot pavement of Victoria Island, and he did not cry. He wanted to. The tears were there, gathered at the back of his eyes like a crowd waiting for a gate to open, but he swallowed them. He swallowed them hard, and he stood straight, and he looked up at the glass building one last time, and something shifted inside him. It was not anger exactly, though anger was part of it. It was something more powerful than anger. It was decision. The kind of decision that settles in a man's bones like iron and does not move again, no matter what the world throws at him. He took out his phone, a small, cheap phone with a cracked screen, and he called his friend Chinedu. Chinedu was the only person Williams knew who understood business the way Williams understood hunger. They had grown up 2 streets apart in Ajegunle, and they shared the same kind of mind, always looking at problems and seeing opportunities hiding inside the problems like gold buried under mud. Chinedu picked up on the second ring, and Williams told him everything. He told him about the green folder and the cracked shoes and the red dress and the 4 minutes and the security guard and the laughter. He told it all without his voice breaking because he had already decided that his voice would never break over Ebube again. Chinedu was quiet for a moment. Then Chinedu said something that Williams would remember for the rest of his life. He said, "Williams, forget the job. Let us build something they cannot reject us from because we will own it." That sentence hit Williams like electricity. It went from his ear straight into the center of his chest, and it did not leave. That evening, the 2 of them sat in Chinedu's small room in Ajegunle with one small rechargeable lamp and a torn notebook, and they began to write. They wrote down every idea they had. They wrote down every resource they did not have but would find a way to get. They wrote down a plan so ambitious that if anyone else had seen it that night, they would have laughed. But Williams and Chinedu did not need anyone else to believe it. They believed it themselves, and that was enough to begin. The first 2 years were not a journey, they were a war. Williams and Chinedu started a small logistics and delivery business with 1 second-hand motorcycle and 2 mobile phones. They delivered packages, documents, food, anything that needed to move from one part of Lagos to another. They worked from 5 in the morning until sometimes 2 or 3 at the next morning. Williams drove the motorcycle, while Chinedu managed the calls and the accounts in the small notebook that became their Bible. They ate cheap food. They slept in short stretches. They had no office. Their office was wherever they were standing with a phone in their hand. Every naira they made went back into the business. There were weeks when Williams ate gari and groundnut for 5 days straight and told himself it tasted like victory because he was choosing it, not because he had no other option. That difference mattered to him more than the hunger. By the 3rd year, they had 3 motorcycles and hired 2 other young men from Ajegunle. By the 4th year, they had a small van, an actual office space in Surulere, and contracts with 3 medium-sized companies in Lagos to handle their deliveries exclusively. People started to notice them. A magazine ran a small feature on them under a column about young entrepreneurs rising from unexpected places. Williams read that article 10 times, not out of pride, but because each time he read it, he remembered the green folder and the red dress and the 4 minutes, and he added more fire to the engine inside him that was already running at full speed. He never forgot where he was going. Not for one day, not even on the days when the engine of one of the vans broke down, or when a client refused to pay on time, or when the rain flooded their small office and destroyed a week's worth of records. He never forgot.
It was Chinedu who saw the opportunity first. He came to Williams one Tuesday morning with a newspaper folded to a specific page, and he placed it on the desk without saying a word. Williams looked down. The headline read, Zencom Logistics Company placed under receivership as parent group seeks buyers. Williams stared at that headline for a long time. His heart was doing something unusual inside his chest. Because Zencom Logistics was not just any company. Zencom Logistics was the parent company of the firm where Ebube worked as human resources manager. It was the same glass building on Adeola Odeku Street. The same marble floors, the same reception where a woman had once pointed to a plastic chair without a smile. Williams looked up at Chinedu, and Chinedu looked back at him, and no words were necessary because they had been friends long enough to have full conversations with their eyes alone. The acquisition process took 8 months. It was complicated and expensive, and there were 3 other interested buyers who had more money and more history and more connections than Williams and Chinedu. But Williams had something those other buyers did not have. He had a reason that went beyond profit. He walked into every negotiation meeting knowing exactly why he was there, and that knowledge gave him a steadiness and a patience that the other bidders could not match. He prepared harder, he stayed longer, he offered creative terms, he leveraged every relationship they had built over 7 years in the Lagos business community. He called in every favor. He walked through 2 weekends without sleeping properly. And when the final call came on a Thursday afternoon in the 7th month of negotiations, the voice on the other end of the phone told him that the board had accepted his group's offer. Williams put the phone down slowly. He looked out the window of his office in Surulere at the Lagos skyline that had once seemed like it belonged only to other people. He breathed in once, he breathed out once, and then he put his head down on his desk and he wept. Not from sadness, from the weight of a promise finally kept. The morning Williams walked back into the glass building on Adeola Odeku Street as his new owner, he wore a simple dark suit. No drama, no celebration convoy, no photographers. Just Williams and Chinedu and their lawyer walking through the glass doors that had once swung shut on a boy with a cracked shoes and a green folder. The marble floors were the same, the receptionist's desk was the same, but everything was different now because the man walking across those floors was different in every way that mattered. The staff had been called to a general meeting in the main conference room, and they did not yet know who the new owner was. They were gathered and nervous, the way people gather when they know change is coming, but do not know what shape it will take. Williams stood at the front of that conference room and looked out at the faces before him. And there she was, Ebube, sitting in the 3rd row in a grey blazer, her eyes scanning the new face at the front of the room with a careful calculation of a woman trying to place someone she might have seen before. Williams watched the moment she recognized him. He watched it travel across her face like a slow wave. The color changed, the eyes widened, her hand moved to her mouth and stopped halfway, frozen. Williams did not smile with cruelty. He did not point at her. He did not say her name out loud or ask the room to look at her. He was not that man. Instead, he simply addressed the room calmly and professionally and said that his vision was growth and dignity for every person in the building, from the highest paid manager to the security officers at the gate. He said he believed in people who worked hard regardless of where they came from. When the meeting ended and people filed out, Ebube remained in her seat. When the room was empty except for the 2 of them, she stood up slowly and she walked to where he was standing, and she opened her mouth, and what came out was not the voice of the woman in the red dress who had laughed at a boy with cracked shoes. What came out was something quieter and heavier and altogether human. She said she was sorry. Williams looked at her for a long moment, and then he nodded once. He told her that her position was safe as long as her work remained strong. He told her that where a person starts is not where a person has to finish. Then he picked up his folder, the same kind of green folder from 7 years ago, and he walked out. Outside the building, Chinedu was waiting with 2 bottles of cold water. They did not toast with champagne. They drank their cold water under the Lagos sun, like 2 boys from Ajegunle who always knew that one day the story would end exactly like this. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe, like, and share this video with your loved ones.